she gave it 2.5 stars. She came back every Friday for 2 years. The review ran on a Thursday. It was titled Alma, or The Audacity of Potential. It was violent, as all her reviews were, under the pseudonym The Hungry Ghost, a name she had chosen at 26 when she'd started the column, partly because it sounded good, and partly because it described, with uncomfortable accuracy, the specific hunger of someone who ate professionally and was never quite satisfied. The review gave Alma 2.5 stars out of 5. It said the space was beautiful, raw brick, candlelight, the kind of room that understood that a meal was also an atmosphere. It said the wine list showed genuine knowledge and no pretension. It said the lamb was the best thing she'd eaten in 6 months, and that if she were a different kind of critic, she would have stopped there. But she was not a different kind of critic. It also said the pacing was uneven. The amuse-bouche was a concept looking for an execution. The dessert menu read like an apology for something that hadn't happened yet. And the whole experience felt like watching someone enormously talented refuse at the last possible second to commit. Alma has all the ingredients of something extraordinary, she had written. Whether it ever becomes that is apparently not yet its problem to solve. 2.5 stars. She went back the following Friday under the name M. Renard, her standard alias, the one she used when she wasn't on assignment and didn't want to be recognized, and sat at the corner table and ordered the lamb again, because she was a professional, and professionals verified their findings. The lamb was still extraordinary. The amuse-bouche had been replaced. The new one was, she wrote nothing down. She never wrote anything down in the restaurant. It was too obvious, precise, and strange, and completely intentional. Like someone had read her review and responded to it through food rather than words. She went back the next Friday, and the one after that. She told herself this was research. She was monitoring a subject. She was a professional. This was professional. It was a Friday night 2 years later when she walked into Alma, asked for the Renard table, and found someone already sitting in it. The Hungry Ghost, Alma, first visit, 2.5 stars. Alma has all the ingredients of something extraordinary. The room knows what it's doing. The lamb knows what it's doing. The chef, and you can feel the chef in every plate. That particular imprint of someone who cooks like it costs them something, knows somewhere deep down what they're doing. The question is whether knowing is the same as committing. Come for the lamb, come for the wine, come to see what this becomes. Come back in a year, and maybe I'll have a different verdict.
The man at the table. He was not a customer. She could tell immediately, the way he sat, the way he held the room, the way the servers moved around him with the specific deference of orbit rather than service. He was in his early 30s, dark-haired, with the kind of hands that had worked for something, scarred at the knuckles, steady, not decorative. He was wearing a chef's jacket with the sleeves pushed up, and he was sitting at her table with a glass of wine and an expression that said he had been waiting for her specifically. Her stomach did something she chose to classify as professional concern. The host, Marco, who had been seating her every Friday for 2 years and had the warm impenetrability of someone paid to know things and say nothing, gave her a look that was almost apologetic and gestured toward the table. She walked over. She sat down across from him because she was Celeste Monroe, and she did not retreat from things, and she said, with the composure of someone who was definitely not caught, "You're in my chair." Renard's chair, he said. Yes. His voice was low and even and carried the particular quality of someone who had spent years communicating in a loud kitchen by being the calmest thing in it. "And you are?" "Noah Castillo. I own this restaurant." She looked at him, he looked at her. The candle between them did its warm, indifferent thing. "Congratulations," she said. "It's a beautiful space." "I know, you said so 2.5 stars ago." The bottom dropped out of the moment in the specific way it does when a thing you have been carefully not thinking about is named out, loud in public, by someone who has clearly been thinking about it at length. She did not let it show. She had a face for this, 2 years of professional poker at restaurant tables, and she deployed it now, settling back in her chair with the unhurried ease of someone who was absolutely not having a crisis. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said. Celeste Monroe, staff food writer at the Tribune, side column called The Hungry Ghost, which you've been running for 4 years under a pseudonym you clearly thought was airtight. He picked up his wine. "It's not airtight. How long have you known?" 8 months. 8. She stopped. 8 months. She'd been sitting at this table every Friday for 8 months, while the man whose restaurant she'd half eviscerated knew exactly who she was. "And you kept seating me. You kept coming back." "I was researching, I know." "Marco mentioned you always order the same 3 things, take no notes, and spend 20 minutes on every course." "That's not research." He said it without heat, just observationally. The way someone states a thing they've had 8 months to get comfortable with. She looked at him. He looked back. The restaurant moved around them, the warm hum of a full Friday room. Glasses and conversation, and the distant sound of something perfect happening in the kitchen. "What do you want?" she said. "To cook you dinner," he said, "and then have a conversation about the review. The 2.5-star review one wrote 2 years ago, the one you've been sitting on a follow-up to for 23 months. She opened her mouth, closed it. She had, in fact, been sitting on the follow-up for 23 months, which was not a thing she had ever told anyone, which meant he had counted backward from now to the review and done math she hadn't expected him to do. "You counted." "I'm a chef. I count everything." She looked at the empty place setting in front of her, at the wine, her usual, already poured, which meant Marco had been complicit in this from the beginning, which she was going to have to think about later. She picked it up. "Fine," she said, "cook me dinner, but I'm warning you, I'm going to have opinions." The corner of his mouth moved. "I'm counting on it." His 8 months earlier, when he figured it out, he'd been going through old reservation notes, a habit, the kind you develop when you've run a restaurant long enough to know that patterns tell you things menus can't. When he found it. Renard, every Friday, corner table, same order, 2 hours minimum. Had been coming since 3 weeks after the review dropped. He'd pulled up the review, read it again, the 4th or 5th time, because it was the kind of review you read more than once. Not because it was cruel, but because it was specific, and specificity meant someone had actually been paying attention. Then he looked at the date of the first Renard reservation. 3 weeks after publication, he'd stood in his empty restaurant at 7 in the morning and thought about a critic who gave him 2.5 stars, and then quietly came back every week for 11 months and wrote nothing. He thought about what that meant. He thought about it for 8 months before he sat down at the table. He cooked her 7 courses, not the menu. His menu was 4 courses on a Friday, clean, considered, the kind of restraint that announced itself as confidence. This was something else. This was a conversation conducted entirely in food, and she understood it as one, which she suspected he'd known she would. The first course arrived without explanation. She knew better than to ask. A chef who wanted you to know what you were eating would tell you. She tasted it, set down the fork. "This is the amuse-bouche, the original one. The one you said was a concept looking for an execution." "It was." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I want you to taste where it started." She tasted it again. It was technically accomplished and conceptually incomplete. She'd been right, which did not feel as satisfying as it should. "Okay," she said. The second course was the new amuse-bouche, the one that had replaced it, a month after the review. She'd eaten it every Friday since, but never said anything about it because Maynard didn't leave feedback and Celeste Monroe wasn't supposed to be there. It was extraordinary. It had always been extraordinary. This one, she said, knew what it was.
Yes.
What changed? He was quiet for a moment, refilling her glass with the precision of someone who had decided exactly how much to say. Your review? Specifically, the line about potential being an excuse. I didn't say that. You implied it. Whether it ever becomes that is apparently not yet its problem to solve. That's what you wrote. She looked at him. You memorized it. I read a lot. Was it? She stopped. She was going to ask if it made him angry, and then decided she'd rather watch his face answer it than hear the curated version. His face said, yes. And then, underneath that, something more complicated. It was the most honest thing anyone had written about this restaurant, he said, which I hated, because honest is harder to argue with than wrong. The third course came, the fourth, the fifth. He stayed at the table, which was irregular, unprecedented, the kind of thing that made the servers exchange significant glances that she cataloged and set aside. And they talked the way people talk when the food between them is doing half the work. He talked about the restaurant the way she'd heard him talked about in the industry, in the way chefs talked about other chefs, which was the only truly honest journalism she knew as someone who had built Alma from nothing, had lost the first version of it to a fire, had rebuilt it in 14 months with the same team because none of them had left, which was the most important sentence she'd heard about a kitchen in years. None of them left, she said, in 14 months of rebuilding after a fire. No, that's not nothing. It's everything. She thought about the review, about the line she'd been most proud of, the potential as excuse line, and how she'd written it in the specific mood of a critic who'd been disappointed by something she'd hoped would be great, which was its own kind of admission, if you read it right. She had hoped it would be great. She had gone in hoping. That was why 2.5 stars had felt like the honest number, not cruelty, but the gap between what it was and what she'd already imagined it could be. She had not, until right now, sitting across from the man who had rebuilt it from a fire, considered that he might have read it the same way. The 6th course was the lamb. She had eaten it every Friday for 2 years. She knew every note of it, the fat rendered to the exact right side of yielding, the herb crust that tasted like someone's grandmother's garden and also somehow like something entirely new. Just that she had once written 3 paragraphs about in her personal journal and then deleted because it felt embarrassing. She looked up from it. He was watching her eat, not preterily with the focused attention of someone who communicated in this language and was waiting to hear what she had to say. You already know, she said. I want to hear you say it. The lamb is perfect. It was perfect 2 years ago.
Yes.
You gave it 2.5 stars. The lamb deserved 5. The restaurant was still figuring out what it was, and now? She set down her fork. She looked at him across the table, the candle, the wine, the 7 courses of a conversation she hadn't planned to have, and she thought about 23 months of Friday nights, under a fake name, eating the food of someone who had been quietly, stubbornly, magnificently proving her right about the potential and wrong about the ceiling. Now, she said carefully, I have a problem. Tell me. The follow-up review I've been not writing. The reason I haven't written it is that it would require me to publicly admit that I was not wrong exactly. Incomplete? She pointed at him. I was going to say premature in my conclusions, but sure. And you don't like admitting that. I am a food critic. My entire professional identity is that my palate is reliable and my judgment is sound. Your palate was reliable. You said the lamb was perfect. You said the room understood itself. You said the wine list had no pretension. I also said the dessert menu read like an apology. It did. Have you had dessert here in the last 6 months? She paused. She had. It was extraordinary. She had been not writing about it for 6 months specifically. I'm going to need you to stop doing that. Doing what? Being right about everything. It's very inconvenient. He almost smiled. She was beginning to map his almost smiles, the slight shift at the corner, the way his eyes changed register before his face did. And she was aware that mapping them was a thing she had started doing and should probably stop. She had gone in hoping it would be great. That was the tell she'd buried in the review, the gap between what it was and what she'd already imagined. You only write that sentence about a place you wanted to love. The 7th course was dessert. It came without the menu description she'd been reading for 6 months. Just the plate, and one additional thing she hadn't seen before. A single line of dark chocolate beside the main element, impressed into it in the kind of small, deliberate mark that took a practiced hand. 2.5 stars. She stared at it. You put my review in the dessert. I put your rating in the dessert. There's a difference. Noah.
Yes.
That is either the most petty thing I've ever seen or the most. She stopped. The most what? I'm still deciding. She tasted it. The chocolate was bitter in the particular way that wasn't unpleasant but demanded your attention, the same way the whole evening had. Demanded her attention, the same way he had from the moment she sat down across from him and found him already there, already waiting, already a person she hadn't prepared for. The 2.5 stars, she said. You put them there to tell me something. I put them there because they were the beginning. The beginning of what? The restaurant getting better. You came back 3 weeks after the review. I didn't know it was you then. I just knew M. Renard was back every Friday, ordering the same things, staying 2 hours. And I thought, he paused, in the way that meant he was selecting from multiple true things, the one he was ready to say out loud. I thought, whoever this person is, they're paying attention. And I cooked like someone was paying attention. She set down the fork. You cooked for me, she said, for 2 years, without knowing it was me. I cooked for whoever Renard was. Someone who came back after a bad review. Someone who ordered the lamb every time. Someone who spent 20 minutes on every course like they were listening to what it was trying to say. The restaurant had thinned out around them. Late Friday, the tail end of service, the room quieter now and warmer for it. She was aware of the particular quality of his attention, the way it had been on her all evening, not performing interest, but simply, continuously, there. The way the kitchen was an extension of him, the food a language he'd been speaking to her in for 2 years without knowing her name. You know what's annoying? She said. Tell me. I've been coming back every Friday for 2 years, and I told myself it was research, professional due diligence, monitoring a subject, and I think I just liked eating here. A pause. Just the food? She looked at him. He looked back with the steady, patient expression of a man who had spent 2 years cooking for someone he didn't know in 8 months. Knowing who she was and sitting on it, and had now, apparently, run out of patience for the oblique approach. You've been cooking at me, she said slowly. That's what this is. You've been arguing with my review through food. Every Friday, for 2 years. Is it working? Infuriatingly, yes. Then write the follow-up. I can't write the follow-up now. I've been sitting at this table for 2 years. There's a conflict of... Not about the restaurant. She stopped. He was looking at her with an expression that had moved past the composed, culinary professional version she'd been managing all evening and arrived somewhere quieter, unguarded. The look of someone who has put a lot of thought into a thing and has decided to just say it. You've been coming back every Friday for 2 years, he said. So have I. I'm here every Friday, Celeste. I run this restaurant. But I noticed, somewhere around month 4, that I started making sure I was on the floor on Fridays, that I started clocking when M. Renard arrived. Noah. The food got better because someone was paying attention. You were paying attention. And somewhere in the last 2 years, the someone and the food got, he paused, mixed up. She looked at him for a long moment, the 2.5 stars pressed into the chocolate on the plate between them, the lamb she'd eaten every Friday, the almost smile she'd been mapping without meaning to, the 23 months of follow-up she'd been not writing because she couldn't figure out how to say, I went back and I was wrong about the ceiling, and I couldn't stop going back. You're telling me, she said, that you fell for a food critic who gave you 2.5 stars. I'm telling you I fell for whoever came back. That's the same person. I know. I wrote that you refused to commit, and you came back every week to see if that changed. She opened her mouth. He waited, the way he always did, she realized, the way the food always did, giving her time to taste it rather than rushing her to a verdict. It changed, she said quietly. Yeah, he said. It did. The night he decided to sit at the table he had known for 8 months. He had seated her every Friday for 8 months, sent out her usual order, watched from the kitchen pass as she spent 20 minutes on every course, and said nothing. He had told himself he was waiting for the right moment. That was partially true. The fuller truth was that he had not wanted to end the Fridays, and Renard coming in was the fixed point of his week, the thing he cooked toward. He had not wanted to introduce reality into it because reality had a way of making things smaller. But he had also been watching her across 8 months get quieter with every meal. Not bored, the opposite. The way someone gets quiet when something is becoming important to them and they haven't decided what to do about it yet. He recognized it because it was the same thing happening to him. He made a reservation under her alias, sat down at her table, and waited. She was worth the risk of the Fridays. The last table cleared at 11:15. The servers disappeared into the back with the practiced efficiency of a kitchen that had closed 10,000 times. Marco, wiping down the bar with the expression of a man who had known this evening was going to go this way, and was privately satisfied about it, glanced once at their table, and then very deliberately glanced away. Celeste and Noah were still at the corner table with the wine and the crumbs of 7 courses and the chocolate plate with the 2.5 stars. Can I ask you something?
Yes.
The fire, the rebuild. 14 months and nobody left. She turned her glass. How? He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, just taking the question seriously, which she was beginning to understand was how he took everything. I told them what we were rebuilding and why. Not the restaurant, the reason for the restaurant. Which is? My grandmother came here, to this country, came with nothing. Cooked everything she missed into existence in whatever kitchen she could find. She taught me not recipes. The idea that food is how you put something back in the world when the world has taken something from you. She looked at him. Alma is her name, he said. She stared at the room, the candles burning down, the brick walls, the warm nothing of a restaurant after closing, with the specific feeling of understanding something you'd been looking at for 2 years without seeing it. I didn't know that. It's not on the website. Why not? Because some things you cook into the food and you don't need to explain. She thought about the lamb. About 2 years of Friday nights eating something she'd never quite been able to describe accurately. Because the accurate description wasn't technical. It was the taste of someone putting something back. Of cooking like it cost them something, which was the line she'd written in the review and hadn't fully understood when she wrote it. I'm going to need to significantly rewrite the follow-up, she said. Take your time. I've been taking my time for 23 months. You were waiting until you understood it. I was avoiding admitting I'd been wrong. Those aren't mutually exclusive. She laughed, quick and genuine, the kind that surprised her, and he watched it with the expression he'd had all evening, the one that had moved from guarded to open over the course of 7 courses, and was now somewhere she didn't have a clean label for but recognized the territory of. You know what the worst part is? She said. Tell me. You've been coming back every Friday. I run the restaurant. I'm here every Friday. You know what I mean? He did. She could see that he did. Yes, he said. I've been coming back every Friday. S'il have. I know. He reached across the table, unhurried, giving her the whole length of the reach to opt out, and his hand covered hers where it rested beside her glass. Warm. Steady. The hands that had cooked for her for 2 years without knowing her name. That had put 2.5 stars in chocolate to tell her the whole story started there. She turned her hand over and held his. Properly, like she meant it. For the record, she said, the follow-up review is going to be very complimentary. I don't care about the review. What do you care about? I looked at her across the last table in the empty restaurant, with its burned-down candles and its Alma, named for his grandmother, and its 7-course argument that had taken 2 years to have, and said simply, whether M. Renard keeps the Friday reservation. She looked at him. She kissed him across the corner table. Their corner table. 2 years of Fridays making it theirs in a way no reservation system had ever officially recorded. And he kissed her back with the thorough, unhurried attention he brought to everything. One hand still under hers, and the other finding her face. And the empty restaurant held them the way good rooms hold good things, without comment, without ceremony, with the quiet solidity of something that was built to last. When they broke apart, Marco was very visibly not looking at them from behind the bar, which was a masterclass in discretion, and they both noticed it and said nothing. He knew, Celeste said. He's always known. He knows everything. How long has he worked here? Since the rebuild. He was the first one back. She looked at Marco, who was whistling something quietly and relocating a wine glass from one end of the bar to the other with elaborate purposefulness. Marco, she called.
He looked up.
His expression was the picture of innocent surprise. 2.5 stars was too low. He smiled, the full, unguarded version, the one he'd apparently been holding in reserve for this specific sentence. He said, and went back to his glass. The review ran on a Thursday. It was titled Alma, Revisited on Being Wrong in the Best Possible Way. It was, for the first time in 4 years, byland under her real name, Celeste Monroe. Not the hungry ghost, Celeste Monroe, because she had decided. Somewhere between the 7th course and a Friday morning when she'd woken up in an apartment above a restaurant kitchen to the smell of something extraordinary being made downstairs, that the ghost didn't need to be hungry anymore. It gave Alma 5 stars. It said the room still knew what it was doing. It said the wine list had deepened. It said the lamb was the same extraordinary thing it had always been, faithful to itself in the way only the truly confident can afford to be. And the dessert, which had once read like an apology, now read like a declaration. It said, 2 years ago, I wrote that Alma had the ingredients of something extraordinary. I was right about the ingredients. I was wrong about the timeline. Some things take the time they take. The best things always do. It said, go, make a reservation, order the lamb, stay for dessert, and if you find the corner table occupied, it is. It has been every Friday for 2 years. Some reservations are harder to cancel than others. She filed it at 11 p.m. and went downstairs. Noah was still in the kitchen. He was always still in the kitchen. She was learning the rhythms of a life built around service. The late nights and the early mornings and the days that tasted like something being made from scratch. And he looked up when she came in. It's filed, she said. 5 stars? I told you I don't do 5 stars. You told me that 3 weeks ago. Things change. He set down what he was doing, looked at her across the kitchen with the open, unhurried expression that she had gone from mapping to simply receiving, letting it land the way the food always landed, without rushing to a verdict. Celeste. Yeah. You know I didn't sit at your table to get a better review. I know. The 5 stars. The 5 stars are because the restaurant deserves 5 stars. The me being here is entirely separate. She looked at him. I am a professional, Noah. I have a palate. My palate says 5 stars. My palate is not compromised by the situation. The personal and professional situation that we have found ourselves in, which I am navigating with great competence and zero internal conflict. He came around the counter, the whole length of the kitchen, unhurried, in his chef's jacket with the sleeves pushed up, exactly as he'd looked the night she'd sat down across from him and found everything she thought she had figured out, getting quietly, comprehensively rearranged. And he put his arms around her from behind and pressed his mouth to her hair and said, against it, low and warm, zero internal conflict, completely calm, very professional. Don't me. The follow-up took 23 months. I was being thorough. You came back because you couldn't stay away. I came back because the food got better. The food was always good, Celeste. She turned in his arms. He was looking at her the way he'd looked at her all along, from the very first Friday. Probably even before he knew who she was, like she was something worth taking the time to understand, like a thing he intended to keep cooking for. The food was always good, he said quietly. You just stopped being angry long enough to taste it. She looked at him for a long moment. I'm putting that in the review. You already filed. I'll add an addendum. The review is about the restaurant. The quote is about the restaurant. He looked at her. The almost smile, she knew it completely now, had stopped mapping and started simply loving it. Arrived and stayed. Fine. The food was always good, the chef told me on a Friday night after service, in a kitchen that smelled like everything I'd been trying to write about for 2 years. You just stopped being angry long enough to taste it. He was right. He usually is. Celeste Monroe, The Tribune. Alma, 5 stars. The review ran on Thursday. On Friday, the Renard reservation held. It always held. It had been held for 2 years. It was the most permanent reservation in the book. And Celeste came in at 7 and sat at the corner table and ordered the lamb because she always ordered the lamb. And because the lamb was perfect, and because some things you come back to not out of habit, but because they are, and have always been, worth coming back to. Noah came out of the kitchen at 8, which he never did during service, and sat across from her, which he also never did during service. And Marco looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man who had been waiting for this particular development for considerably longer than 8 months, and found it entirely satisfying. You're supposed to be in the kitchen, she said. My sous chef has it. You never leave during service. I had somewhere to be. She looked at him across the table, the candle between them. The room full of people eating something made with great care by someone who cooked like it cost him something. In a restaurant named for his grandmother, rebuilt from a fire because no one left. 5 stars, she said. 5 stars, he said back. She picked up her fork. He poured the wine. The reserved table held, as it always had, as it would. The most disarming thing in the world is not being loved when you are easy to love. It is being cooked for quietly, faithfully, by someone who learned the shape of your hunger before they knew your name and kept the table every Friday, just in case you came back. A story about coming back.